Here's my interview with Dr. Kapil Gupta, who is a personal advisor, I'd like to say a spiritual advisor to celebrities and professional athletes who want to take their lives and their performances to the next level. We talk about his book, Atmamun, which discusses the no-mind philosophy that Tom Cruise's character in the movie The Last Samurai struggled with when he was fighting. Another warrior suggested, no, you're thinking too hard. You have too many minds. So we talk about that. We talk about parenting. Wait till you hear what Dr. Gupta has to say about parenting. That will blow your mind. Very enlightening. This conversation has changed my life, and I hope it will give you a new perspective about yours as well. Okay, Dr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate having you. I've been following you for a few years now, and I have one burning question.
Okay.
Who is Dr. Gupta?
A very difficult question to answer.
I stumped you already, huh?
Absolutely. I suppose in the end, we're all searching for something, and I would say that more than anything, I'm a very fascinated student of life, and have been on the search for the sort of otherworldly elements such as enlightenment or nirvana or freedom or whatever name you wish to use for quite some time. And this is the sort of the engine behind my writings.
And well, I want to get into your book, but first of all, let's talk about what happened before the book and how you got started on this journey, this soul-searching journey.
I was born in India, and as you likely know, India is steeped in the tradition of the Himalayan masters and the swamis and the yogis and the ascetics who leave everything behind and pursue a life devoted to attaining the sort of the supernatural qualities of a human being once he transcends his mind. And those things have always been something that have been very close to me. And I wasn't born in a very religious home. In fact, I think that religion often gets in the way. Those things, for whatever reason, have always enamored me since my youth. And that sort of bit has been my journey for much of my life. And as time has gone on, my pursuit towards those things has only grown deeper and much more nuanced. And as a result of which, I find myself here today.
And you train and work with professional athletes. First of all, any names you care to share or can share?
Probably not in the setting of an open public forum such as this, but professional athletes from the side of the PGA Tour and professional hockey, and some quite well-known names. But it's interesting to me that the higher the stage, the more there is the need for freedom and professional, the world of professional athletics and the world of sort of high-powered business and CEOs and certainly the world of celebrity is fraught with a significant amount of peril, if you will, with regard to taking one away from one's fundamental nature and immersing him sort of in the cosmetics of the traditional world that we know of today.
I've been in sports all of my life, from motocross racing, believe it or not, to I was a state champion swimmer 2 times.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, and I've been a international fitness presenter and group fitness instructor for 35 years. So I understand this concept that you're talking about. And I wondered if you could share with our audience how you would train a professional athlete, because once they get to the point where they're as good as they're going to get, there is a mind over matter scenario. And what you talk about in your book is the concept of having no mind, like the Tom Cruise movie Last Samurai.
Yes.
And it's also a way to experience bliss. How do you train athletes to get to the next level using no mind?
You ask a wonderful question. It's something that's very close to my heart. Professional athletes are trained according to a particular tradition, and the philosophy of that tradition is that what makes a professional athlete great is technique. And if he falters for any reason, there is something that is in his technique that is preventing him from reaching the highest level. And I would dispute that. I think that once you get to a certain level of proficiency, it is no longer about technique. And that doesn't mean that technique cannot be honed and that there isn't room for improvement. There always is. But that isn't what is preventing one from reaching the highest heights. Because, and evidence of that is that you have in every sport people who are at the highest of heights and who very often do not demonstrate a perfect textbook technique. In fact, they're often very idiosyncratic. So the people who do things well, the people who I always say, the people who do things the greatest, or that which you do the greatest, are the things that you know not how you do. And in fact, if you were to explain to me exactly how you did a particular thing, I could almost bet that you wouldn't be a master at that thing, because it would be a very intellectual process. And sports and dance and song and any sort of rhythmic pursuit is much more an element of mindlessness than it is of mindfulness. When you are so for years and years, I wanted to know what the zone was. And I have experienced the zone. Every athlete has experienced the zone. I grew up playing basketball and hockey. And I wanted to know fundamentally what it was. And I would buy books called The Zone and get into the zone and various books. And I would read the books, and the books would all say the same thing. They would say that time slows down. They would say that things become effortless. And it would take them 200 pages to say the same thing. And I became very frustrated by that because you haven't told me anything. I want to know, I understand that time slows down, and I know that things become easy. We already know that. Everyone knows that. I want to know what the zone is. And since, like all things, if no one gives you the answer, then you must find it for yourself. And so I spent many years trying to figure out what the zone actually was. And I discovered that through my own experimentation and through teaching golf and various different things, is the zone is actually not a state in which the mind is calm. And in fact, if you try to make the mind calm, like if you try to catch a dog by the throat and make him calm, he will retaliate. And the mind will also retaliate. So what I've discovered is that the zone is not really a place in which the mind is calm. It is a place in which the mind has disappeared. Because when there is no mind, there is no thought. And when you are in the zone, so to speak, you aren't thinking. You are simply reacting. And everything comes from you out of instinct, not through deliberation and technique. In fact, it becomes what I call a techniqueless technique. And when you arrive at the place of a techniqueless technique, then all that flows from you is natural and instinctual. And instinct is never wrong. The mind is often wrong. Thinking is almost always wrong. But that which comes from instinct is never wrong because it's part of nature. And so when I have an athlete, I don't begin as to how I can fix him. I try to figure out what it is that is preventing him from achieving freedom. And it's almost always things having to do with technique, or I must do it in a particular way, or something is wrong in the physicality of my motion, or that I'm not thinking properly, and therefore I must think positively instead of negatively. And those are all cosmetics. They don't ever address the issue at heart. And so that's sort of the beginning stages of how I approach a professional athlete.
So you say in your book Stop replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts and stop attempting to reframe the pain into something more psychologically palatable. But how can you do that in this world, especially in Western society, where we look to a recipe for success? Give me the ingredients. Tell me how much flour, sugar, water, salt, eggs. Tell me how much to put in and I'll do it. So how do you attain that no mind status?
No mind is not attained. It comes to you naturally. Most things in life that are otherworldly are not grabbed by the throat. They come when the blockages to their arrival have been removed. So the recipe and formulaic sort of tendencies of modern day culture, all that can do is it can create mediocrity. If you were to ask Picasso how to paint, he would not know how. And if he attempted to show you how, he would be lying because he doesn't know. When a pianist touches the keyboard, it is his fingers that play, not himself. It is only when he himself exits the room is his masterpiece possible.
So you have to have the skill first, obviously.
Absolutely.
You have to have practiced over and 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 over 1,000 million times. And when the technique becomes effortless, and I just went skiing, and I understand, I've been skiing all my life. And for me as a skier, there's nothing like when everything comes together, that one good run, when the sun is shining on your face, the temperature is right, the snow is right, you're feeling good, and your skis glide effortlessly down the mountain. But to get to that point, sometimes there are other circumstances involved. And I assume with a professional athlete, you've got things that they have things that we don't have to deal with, like cheering crowds or booing crowds. And to rise above that level, to block that all out, that's got to be difficult too.
I don't think it's difficult. I don't think it's difficult to block anything out.
Really?
No. It's difficult to block things out if you try to block them out. Okay? If you present something as a prescription, it becomes difficult. If a person feels that he has no other way out, it becomes easy. Difficulty is only possible when one feels that he has a choice. You see, it's not hard for Tiger to block out the crowds. It's not, because he knows that if he doesn't block them out, he can't play golf. So then it becomes very easy.
What about, this is something that I struggled with when I was much younger, decades ago, and I used to race motocross, and it's a big deal. And motorcycles are all lined up, sometimes 50 or more in one line, and you're waiting for the gate in front of the tire to drop, and everybody takes off at the same time. The moments leading up to that, sometimes I would feel like I was going to throw up. Is there a way? I know you say there's no mind, or there's not a way to block that, but is there a way to work through that?
Okay, I'll give you the answer. All right. I'll respond to your wonderful question.
Okay.
If you go into your bedroom and you turn up the thermostat, the room will get hotter. If you turn the thermostat down, the room will become colder. But if you turn it up and then you go into the room and say, I'm not going to touch the thermostat anymore. I just turned it up and I'm leaving it that way. But I really want you to give me a technique for making it colder. I cannot give you one because the conditions are not ripe. There are many who will give you a technique, and it might work for a day. But while it's working, the mind will be in the back room creating a new antidote for your new technique. And that's why it'll have a shelf life. And that's why a blue pill will always be followed by a red one. Okay? So you ask, The question that you ask is when the gun's about to go off, so to speak, and I am sitting there in anticipation of beginning the race, how is it that I can be calm? And I will say that the question is not how is it that I can be calm, because that would be the same question as asking how is it that I can be warm in a thermostat, in a room with a thermostat which has been turned down. You're not going to be. So then what do? You have to understand how to work the thermostat. So then why is it? The question is not Band-Aids. The question is not what can I do to become calm? The ship has already sailed. Okay? The question becomes, why am I nervous in the first place? That's the question. Now, you will hear very few people ask that question because it is such a common thing to be nervous, and because everyone is. You see, in the land of the insane, only the sane person stands out. Okay? So because everyone is nervous, it is considered normal. And then you will have so-called scientific studies which come out and say, it is good to be nervous. It heightens your peak of on the flow chart, and it enhances performance. So everything justifies the status quo. And I will say that I disagree with nervousness. I disagree with the idea that if you're not nervous, something's wrong with you. I think that if you're nervous, something is wrong with you and everybody else. Well, then what is that? Well, here it is. If you are nervous, then that means that you have desire. Okay, then you're going to ask, well, how do I get rid of desire? Well, that's a very dangerous question. The question is, as long as I have written this in a discourse some time ago, and I'll reiterate it to you today. And my youngest was either 8 or 9 years old, and we were walking on a par 3, and my kids are both golfers, and he asked me, where does fear come from? And I was taken aback by the question, and I was put on the spot. But I had to provide an answer. But I couldn't think, because if I thought, I knew that I would spin my wheels and give an intellectual answer, which would mean nothing. So I allowed my instincts to take over and give him a response. And the response that I found myself giving was, wherever there's a consequence, there is fear. Okay? So if you are in any situation in which there is a perceived consequence, and the bigger the perceived consequence, the more there will be fear. It cannot be otherwise. And if you then say that I will keep the consequence, but I want you to give me an antidote for the fear, I will say that you're being disingenuous.
Very interesting. I like that. Okay, so you touched on that you have children, 2 kids?
Yes, 2 boys.
Okay, so in your book, you talk about parenting. Yeah. And you're laughing because you know what I'm going to bring up, don't you?
The letter?
Okay. Well, the letter too, but one of the statements you made, you said you're right. Being a parent is in many ways a burden, and that parents don't really love their children. Now that's going to create a little bit of turmoil here. So can you please explain?
You know, we spend our lives loving almost nothing. What we call love is fundamentally attachment. And the proof for that is where there is the purity of love, there is no pain. And when you are a parent, you feel pain. You feel also, enormous amounts of joy, but you also feel disappointment. You feel sadness. You feel slighted sometimes. Sometimes the child feels that you aren't listening to him. Wherever there is conflict and wherever there is pain, there is no love. And that is what I mean by, as parents, we don't love our children. And that isn't so much an admonition. It is much more a call to see the truth, so that we will be able to better identify what is fundamentally attachment and what is fundamentally love.
So can you summarize the letter to your children that you wrote in the book?
If I can remember it, it's been a while. Uh, Essentially, if I were to sum up that letter, it would be that any problem that there is in a family between parents and children is always the parent's fault. And if we move beyond that for a second, it isn't about creating fault. If we can move to the next level of that, it would be to say that children listen to very little but mimic everything. And it is the environment in which it is the environment which we create for them that helps to create who they are. But whenever we are parents, we are becoming a parent for the first time. So we don't know. And we are imperfect ourselves. We have not achieved anything like Buddhahood. And as a result, we falter. And we falter on the job. And we falter regularly. And as a result, we create an environment which is not conducive to an environment which is fully nurturing and fully sort of full of unconditional love. So that is sort of the gist of the letter. Is essentially it's a set of apologies. And apologies made from a parent who over time through wisdom understands the errors of his ways and comes face to face with his own ignorance.
Mm. And that's so powerful. Do you mind if I read a couple of
No, sure.
Okay.
Please.
You say, "Dear child, I have so much to apologize for, and I know that an apology is simply not enough, but it marks a new beginning for the relationship that binds me to you. I'm sorry for the times I hurt your heart, for I was blinded by my ego. I'm sorry for the times I saw your tears, but not your heartfelt pain. I'm sorry for the times I considered you less than me, for I was intoxicated by my role as a parent." And you go on and on. I could just cry reading this because it's emotional. Being a parent is the toughest job we can ever have. But so many of us, as you know, are very ill-equipped to do this for our child and to recognize that our kids don't need us so much to control their lives as they do to just be there for them.
Yes, that's right. And the role of parent is something that is bestowed too easily upon us just based upon a biological ability to have children. You know, I think there should be some level of minimal wisdom that one must attain before he or she becomes a parent, because otherwise it's a one-way street. In other words, you don't get a second chance.
Right. Well, we can understand. The older we get, the wiser we get. And by reading books like yours and this letter to our children, we can make amends to a certain extent and try. But okay, I want to move on to a more lively topic. When you call in your book, this made me laugh. You say, "You are a schizophrenic. Your mind rambles endlessly. And you are a walking zombie. You drive to work and you don't remember how you got there." That's so true.
Yes. And what you have just mentioned is the key to enlightenment. What you have just mentioned is the door to achieving abject peace in your life. The ability to curb involuntary thought is the single most direct pathway to achieving everything that you want in your life tomorrow.
And you talk about meditating and being mindful, and that we should not be mindful. But how can you describe to our listeners that they're doing it all wrong?
Okay. Mindfulness is sort of this cherry that has been plucked from an eastern tree and replanted in the soil of the West. And like all things, everything becomes polluted when it becomes commercialized. If you look at yoga, yoga was never fundamentally about postures and exercise. And while it may have those benefits, yoga was always fundamentally about freeing oneself from the mind. Yoga was about, well, from Patanjali, it was about freeing oneself from the mind. But then it takes on this sort of this rock star quality, and everything becomes about the cosmesis and the form and the style and sort of, talking the talk and wearing the garb. And these are the things which really irk me, because then they become insincere. So mindfulness. Now, just the very name of the idea of mindfulness. The entire problem of everyone's life, of all of our lives, is that we're full of mind. So the last thing that you want to do is be mindful. In fact, you are at your best when you're mindless. And yet mindlessness has a derogatory connotation to it. So if mindfulness worked, then there wouldn't be institutions created in its name. If mindfulness worked, then there wouldn't be conferences held on every street corner about being mindful. Because if it worked, then they would be too busy being mindful to make a conference about it. Mindfulness is about, I think it's a good idea, why don't you go be mindful? Now, mindfulness is the idea that you intend to stop thinking, and through effort and volition, you try to be here, present in the present moment. Okay, fair enough. Now, if you try to do that, if you try to be present in the moment and feel the ground as you walk, and feel the shirt on your back, and feel as you're sitting in the car, that's fine. But it is an exercise, and it does not change anyone. And I'll tell you why. Because mindfulness is like attempting to empty the ocean with a teacup. So you can attempt, if your house is falling down, you can attempt to hold the walls of your house up with your outstretched arms. And for a while you'll be able to, but eventually your arms will tire, and the house and gravity will win. The mind will always win. And if you try to watch your thoughts, and if you try to chant, and if you try to say mantras, and if you try to do meditation, you can do those things if you like, but how many millions around the world do you know who meditate? How many millions practice mindfulness? Now it's on every CEO's lips, and now you have the X and Y Center for Mindfulness. And if you go to those centers, and if you look at the meditators around the world, how many of them are enlightened? How many of them have complete freedom? How many of them have total peace? That's where the proof must be. It doesn't matter what I say, it matters what the evidence shows.
So what is the right way to meditate, to relax, to gain that, I say gain no mind?
Okay. One word: sincerity. The person who achieves anything does so when he is sincere, not when he looks for a way. Because the person who asks how fundamentally is playing a clever little game. And the game that he's playing is, how do I stay right where I am without moving, but at the same time get a little taste of what you're talking about? That's not sincere. Sincere is almost like hitting rock bottom. And when a person hits rock bottom, then he or she says to himself, I can't do this anymore. I literally cannot live this way anymore. I will have peace or I will die. And if you look back to Buddha, if you look back to Siddhartha before he became the Buddha, what did he do? He went to the forest and he found ascetics who were doing self-mutilation and not eating but a grain of rice per day. And for years and years, they lived in the forest. And what did they achieve? Nothing. They became hungry, decrepit, and old. They achieved nothing. So after 7 years of doing that, Siddhartha also achieved nothing. And the reason that he achieved nothing was because he was following a prescription, which said, if you do this, if you do that, then you will attain this. It didn't work. So before I continue, I'll say one thing, and that is that if going to such extremes of penance, if those prescriptions didn't work, then what is the mindfulness going to do? Sitting in your air-conditioned room in a leather chair, going to a conference with people on stage telling you to be happy and meditate. So afterwards, after 7 years, he sat down under a tree and he said, you know what? I'm not going to follow any teacher anymore. I'm not going to follow any path. There is no path. I have tried these paths and they led nowhere. So I will sit down under this Bodhi tree, and my bones may break, and my breath may leave my lungs, and I may die. But no matter what happens, I will not arise until I achieve enlightenment. Now, that is sincerity. That is sincerity. That's what he truly, from the bottom of his house, from his heart, wanted. That is a complete and utter, undeniable, and sincere search for truth. When someone is sincere, then we can have a real conversation. And until someone is, the questions are always centered around, give me a technique, what's the 10-step process, what are the 4 P's and the 3 D's, how should I do it, where should I go, how should I sit, are my clothes correct, which thumb and finger should be adjoined, should my back be straight, and that doesn't get anyone anywhere. It just gives them the sort of the ammunition to argue with their mind and say, see, look at me. I'm trying to do something about it.
So for somebody who is just starting out meditating and wants to understand and learn and sincerely wants to grow and become more aware and enlightened, what do you recommend that they do?
Find out, sit down in the quiet of your room at night and find out what are the things that are wrong with your life. Wrong in the sense that what don't you like about it? What things do you really want? And it's a very hard and dangerous question. So the second question, which people usually default to, and I encourage them to do so, is if I don't know what I truly want, then what is it that I absolutely no longer want in my life? And write those things down. Don't make it an exercise. Just write it down so that you'll have it in front of you. Then ask yourself, why am I not already here? Not what do I need to do to get there. Those are fundamentally different questions. Because if you ask, that's why it's always about questions, not about the answers. The questions create the path, and the answers will move you from it. It is if you ask, what do I need to do? Then you have 10,000 conferences, 4,000 preachers, 6,000 gurus, 19,000 magazines, and 14,000 books, which are ready to give you different prescriptions to how and what to do. Therefore, you will be lost, your years will go by, and you will achieve nothing. So ask rather, why am I not already there?
I love what you write in the book. The reason that you are the way you are is because on some level, it's okay with you to be the way you are.
Yes. I disagree with the notion that people don't always get what they want. Yes, they do. Everyone gets what they want. And that doesn't mean it's from level of karma. I mean here and now on the conscious level. Because if your hair was on fire, you would not deliberate and ask someone how and what to do. You would jump into a creek if you had to. And the hair soon would no longer be on fire, I guarantee you that. Because that wouldn't be okay with you.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
You see, we're very clever people. We're very clever. We say that we want certain things, but we kind of do and we kind of don't. Mm-hmm. And so I know what someone wants by looking at what they've already done. And I know what someone doesn't by telling me, but I know what someone doesn't want by hearing them tell me what they do want. Because if they truly wanted it, they would likely already have it.
You work with very, very successful athletes and business leaders who simply cannot continue to live at the frenetic pace that they are. But how do you teach them to find peace in their everyday lives when being a professional athlete is so competitive?
I don't believe in the idea of competition. One of the main reasons that professional athletes don't have peace is because they are competitive. Now, you will naturally ask, well, how can you be a professional athlete and not be competitive? Well, in the end, it isn't your competitiveness that makes you win. It's the level of your performance on a given day. So you can want to win all you want, and you can want to destroy the other person if you want, but that really won't help you, because people are at their best, the muscles are at their best, the limbs move their fastest when someone is relaxed. Okay? Then the question becomes, okay, so then should I go see a masseuse? No. The reason that you're not relaxed isn't because your muscles are tight and they haven't been stretched properly. The reason that you're not relaxed is because you have an intense desire to win. If you did not have an intense desire to win, and the reason that you played was because you enjoyed the circumstances and you enjoyed the environment and you enjoyed playing the game, you genuinely enjoyed it, then there would be no consequence for you. And as a result, your muscles and your tendons and everything about you would instantly become loose because a burden would have been taken off you. You see, what professional sports asks before any game, whether it's NFL, NBA, PGA Tour, doesn't matter. What any game asks is, how well can you play with 12 sandbags on your back? That's what it's asking. I'm not interested in that question. I'm interested in the question which says, how well can you play when you have no sandbags on your back? So I'm not interested in how well someone plays under pressure. I'm interested in how high he can soar when he has no pressure.
One of the other statements that you have in your book that I love is, the only worthwhile watch in the world is not the one with which counts up, but the one which counts down, telling how much time you have left. And I think that's what we fail to realize. And I was suffering from a life-threatening illness, which was pre-emphysema, due to toxic mold exposure in my home. And it took me about a year to recover. And that's why I'm on this quest of healthy living, because if you don't have your health, you have nothing. And I see so many people who abuse their health with drinking and smoking and other excesses and just take it for granted. And every day, I just remember so vividly being so sick that every day to me is a blessing. Every day that I can get up and I can walk and I can run with my dogs and play and cook and do the things that I need to do is just such a blessing. And I think most people don't get that.
You know, I think I also wrote in the book that I wish that nature would have structured our lives such that we had a near-death experience once every 3 months.
Mm-hmm. That's excessive. Once every 3 months, don't you think?
Well, you know, our problem is that we adapt too quickly, and we default to our defaults very quickly. So the thing which makes someone live the quickest is an impending fear of death. When we come face to face with death, it fundamentally changes who we are. The worst thing that we can possibly have is what we have now, and that is the infinite sense of time. If you ask someone, are you going to die? They will all say yes. But if you watch the way that they live, they will live in a way which counteracts their proclamation that they are going to die. They live in such a way that it seems that time is infinite. So if we knew that we were going to die on a certain date, it would change our entire life. But this sense of, well, 10 years from now, I'm going to do this, and 5 years from now, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to retire at 65, and I'm going to, we're living on borrowed time. But that is such an intellectual idea that it never really reaches our hearts. But the moment that it does for a given person, a person who's had a near-death experience, or as you say, you're in a life-threatening situation, then it isn't intellectual anymore, because knowledge means nothing. It's all what you feel in your heart, not what you know in your head. So, but if you look back at sort of the saints of India, several of them went on the path specifically because they had, for whatever reason, this intense feeling that they were going to die. And that immediately sent them on a different trajectory towards an inner search.
In my book, 4 Minutes a Day, Rock and Roll Your Way to Happy, I structure 60 different exercises for 60 days for people to contemplate certain things and write about, use it as a journal. Like what makes you happy? What makes you sad? Write those things down. One of the exercises is if today was your last day, what would you do? Where would you go? And I think so many of us, you're right, we just take it for granted.
It's very easy to do. In fact, it's so enormously difficult. In fact, when I was young, I used to visit cemeteries. And in fact, I took my younger one, was it a year or two ago, to a cemetery. And I want to always have those reminders to myself that is where I'm headed for. Regardless of what I do and where I go and what I achieve and all these things, at the end of the day, I'm going to end up there just like everybody else.
Yep. Well, Kapil, I have so enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that we can have you back on the show again. And before we go, though, can you share your contact info? How can people get in touch with you? How can they read your emails? I'm on your email list, and if you're not on the email list, you need to get on the email list. How can people get more information?
The website is kapilguptamd.com, KAPILGUPTAMD.com. If you are interested in receiving correspondences from me, just send me an email. My email address is on the website, kapil@kapilguptamd.com, and I'd be happy to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today and with so many other people. I know that this information will help to enlighten them. So thank you.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Shemane. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. You don't need years to make changes. All you need is 4 minutes a day to create and live the life of your dreams. Pick up Shemane's best-selling book, 4 Minutes a Day, Rock and Roll Your Way to Happy. The guidance you need to make significant transformations in your life in just 4 minutes a day. Get it now on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Until next time, keep rocking.